So, arrival day. Oh goodness. This must be the one from when I was born. This must be like my birth album. Oh, and there's my measurements. My head was 36 centimeters wide on September 21st, 1992. My name's Alex Peeler. I'm 26 years old, and I'm from Bridgewater, Nova Scotia, and I'm the owner of Squeaky Bell Productions, which is a multimedia company with a focus on advocacy. I started this series because I have Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy, a genetic condition that gradually weakens my muscles, and for this reason I use a wheelchair. I'm also very passionate about the rights of people with disabilities. Well, Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy is a genetic disorder that you're born with, and it basically causes your muscles to get weaker. So instead of your muscles, getting stronger as you get older, they get weaker, right? And that affects all of your muscles, not just like your arms and legs, but also your heart and lungs. So, it can lead to some, health problems as you get older. And people with Duchenne tend to have, a shortened life expectancy. We're not as fast or as strong as our peers, and, there's some things that we can't do, basically anything that requires, heavy amounts of physical activity are very difficult for people with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So, that definitely did, affect me as a child. I couldn't participate in all the same activities as my friends. So, as I got older, I started to hang out more with other people with disabilities who could relate to me and had similar interests, right? So it really did take a while for me to kind of learn how to cope with the disorder. I knew I was different, but it took me a while to kind of learn exactly what that meant. Oh, and there's Mom holding me, and there's Dad. Oh, God. Put on a shirt. My grandfather holding me. Oh, and there's my grandmother holding me. Well, I didn't start using a wheelchair full-time until I was about 11, right? Before that I could walk because Duchenne is a gradual condition. Right, so it wasn't really until I was 11 that I really started to realize just how inaccessible the world was. And yeah, it really just came down to, planning ahead, figuring out which places were accessible, which places weren't, and finding ways to kind of work around it. It was a bit of an adjustment, but after a while, after a few years, you start to get used to it, and it just becomes a normal part of life. Yeah, there was a bit of exclusion and stuff. I mean, like I said, I couldn't do all the same things that my friends could. I couldn't really play sports as well as them. I did try, and they were, did include me some, but like I said, as I got older, it became harder for me to do those things, and so I had to find people to spend time with who had similar interests as I did, right? So stopped spending so much time with people who were into sports and started spending more time with people who were into television and video games and things like that. That's an old family photo. These can't be from Disney World because I'm a Scooby-Doo. He's not Disney. Lots of pictures from when I was a kid. When I graduated from high school, I decided that I wanted to go into film. I was, quite naive, and I had it in my head that I was going to become a big, fancy film director like Steven Spielberg or George Lucas, someone like that. And so I decided to take the Screen Arts program at the Nova Scotia Community College. And that was, a big challenge because it was a very physically demanding program, and, as someone with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, that led to a lot of physical challenges. For example, I couldn't use some of the heavy film cameras without assistance, so I had to find unique ways to overcome those challenges. It was a learning experience for me and for my instructors and my fellow students, but, we found unique ways to kind of overcome those challenges. But as I continued with the program, I started to, realize that being a Hollywood director wasn't for me, and I realized that I had another story to tell. And I started to realize that what I'd rather do is use film as a medium to not only tell my story, but to advocate for people with disabilities, and that kind of led me to start with some of my advocacy work. Yeah, so when I graduated from Screen Arts, one of my instructors suggested that it might be good to, get a little bit more education, and she suggested that I take business. So I looked into it, and I decided that I was going to take the business administration program at the NSCC, specifically focusing on marketing, which I thought would fit well with, filmmaking, because it kind of fits with the role of a producer. And it was when I was in business that I first came up with the idea for Squeaky Wheel Productions. And then I graduated from business a couple of years later, and a couple of years after that, I decided that I was going to take that idea for Squeaky Wheel Productions and turn it into more than an idea, turn it into an actual reality. And so I started Squeaky Wheel Productions, and it was right around then that I started all of my other advocacy work for people with disabilities, and it really all stemmed from my experience in screen arts and business administration, and I was able to put together all of those skills, my passion for filmmaking and my passion for business and my passion for advocacy, and start this company, which I'm hoping will lead me to do even greater things and advocate for people in many different ways. Back in probably 2015, shortly after I graduated from business, I started a petition to the government of Canada asking them to implement a national assistance program for Canadians with disabilities to help them afford, equipment and services that they needed to live independently. There wasn't really a plan, it just kind of happened. I decided I'm going to do this petition, I'm going to go to that youth forum. I got invited to join NSLEO and become the CCD rep, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do that. And then I found out about the advisory board and applied and got accepted, and I kind of just grew like that. And then every time that inspired me to get involved in more things and do more things. And the advocacy just grew and grew from there, and I imagine it will continue to do so in the future because I'm just very passionate about it, and it's something that I do enjoy doing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's been real finicky. But, one of the big problems that we have here on the South Shore when it comes to accessibility, and a lot of other rural areas deal with this, is that we have a lot of old buildings and they tend to not be accessible. A lot of them have stairs to get in. But there's a number of these buildings that have just a small step to get into their building, usually just a few inches high, just high enough that someone in a wheelchair may not be able to get into the building. So we started doing some research for this film, and we stumbled upon an organization called StopGap, which was started by a man named Luke, who was injured in a biking accident and became a paraplegic. And he started to realize how inaccessible the world was, and he encountered this problem firsthand and decided to deal with it head on. So he created this organization called StopGap, which builds small ramps, for businesses, specifically businesses with those small gaps, to make those buildings accessible. We thought that was a good idea. We thought that would be a perfect solution to that same problem that we're having here on the South Shore. So we reached out to them and, learned more about their cause, and we decided that that was a really good idea, and it was a solution that we thought would not only work here on the South Shore, but that we wanted to implement. So we want to take that idea and adapt it for the people here on the South Shore and use it to make the South Shore more accessible. Obviously this is just one of many barriers, but we think it's a good starting point. It's a good way to, spearhead the initiative of making the South Shore more accessible and to educate people about what some of those barriers are and how to overcome them. So we're planning to start here and, this small barrier, overcome this, and then we'll look to solving some of the other challenges that people with disabilities face. But like I said, we thought this was a great idea and a good starting point, and so that's what our plan is. So this StopGap idea is just another tool in my arsenal when it comes to advocating for people with disabilities. It's another solution to a common problem, right? So when you encounter a business that isn't accessible and someone asks you, well, what do I do? This is a potential solution. And it's such an easy, elegant solution that it almost feels like a no-brainer. It makes you wonder, why didn't we think of this sooner?
That will be great. That'll be great for like yourself in a wheelchair and all the strollers that come in and out of here.
Yeah.
So.
There's a lot of different reasons why a business owner may not want to or not be able to make their business accessible. There could be obviously financial barriers. It can cost a lot of money, and even though there is funding out there, it can be difficult to access. And sometimes it's just ignorance. They don't realize that their business is inaccessible, or maybe they don't know how to make their business accessible, which is part of what this documentary aims to, fix. But then, of course, unfortunately, you do get some business owners who know their business isn't accessible and just don't care. They're the minority, but they do exist. But I think for the most part, most business owners want to make their businesses accessible, but they either don't have the resources to do that, or they don't have the knowledge, or it's a combination of both. And so we want to help educate people about accessibility and help make it easier for them to identify those barriers and come up with solutions to overcome those barriers. Well, my vision for, the South Shore and really all of Nova Scotia and Canada is for this country to be one day fully accessible for people with all types of disabilities, whether it's, mobility, disability, sensory, intellectual, mental health, an invisible or visible disability. We just want everyone to be able to, be included in society. Obviously it's a very ambitious goal and it's going to take a lot of work. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. But I think if we continue to advocate and educate people about accessibility and the importance of access and inclusion, I think it is a goal that one day we could quite plausibly reach, right? So that's my goal. And really, my hope is that if I work with other advocates for people with disabilities and advocates for human rights, that we can pool our resources and develop those solutions to make the country more accessible, and we will see a future where no one is excluded.